My grandmother, my late grandmother, who was off the boat from Ireland, a big part of my life. When I played junior hockey, she'd be up in the stands screaming, "Kill him," every time I got in a fight. She was diagnosed with Parkinson's about 14 years before she passed. So I saw her from being the witty Irish queen running around the family parties, slipping me a sip of rum and Coke every now and again, to the full progression until she passed away. And it affected me pretty hard. So I started a golf tournament in her memory when I was with the Bruins. And then two and a half years after the golf tournament, there was a NHL lockout. The Bruins helped run that golf tournament for the 2 years, and then we weren't allowed to talk to the business side. As a player, we weren't allowed to talk to the business side, the Boston Bruins. So I took the opportunity. A little bit of adversity turns into a good thing sometimes. I took the opportunity to create my own foundation to not lose that golf tournament, because it meant so much to me. And then the foundation's obviously morphed into more than just the golf tournament. So that's why Parkinson's became so important to me. That's how I became putting together my foundation, and that's how we started to give back the little bit that we could.
So how old were you when your grandmother was diagnosed? How old was she?
Ooh, good question. I can't remember off the top of my head. All these years, when you play pro hockey, all these years, like, you think of seasons and not how old you are. I remember I was in Chicago. I had to fly into Chicago after a funeral, and that was in 2000. I want to say 11. I honestly, or 13. It's sorry, they all blend together, but she would have been, I think, around 60 when she was diagnosed, maybe a little bit earlier. And yeah, so I remember one time she lived back in Canada, and I lived, I've lived all over the continental North America. So I remember walking in to visit one time, and this is near probably one of the last couple of years that she was in a home, and she was shaking so hard that her arm was like banging off her wheelchair. And sorry, I get a little choked up on this, but her voice was gone at that point, so she couldn't yell for help either. So to walk in and see that visual affected me for the rest of my days.
Thank you.
Apologize
Shawn.
for getting choked up. It's not easy to talk about still.
I'm choked up here too, so thanks for crying on me.
I'm not crying, you're crying.
Exactly.
The body slowly becomes a cage. We lose a little bit at a time, and sometimes all at once, and sometimes we don't have much control over that. So thank you for saying that, and for being so moved, and for making this work.
Shawn, now that you're in Florida, obviously you've transitioned out of the Boston market, and you run a substantial amount of fundraising here in the Boston area. How do you maintain your connection here in Boston, and why is it continue to be important for you?
I think a lot of it was how much I did while I was in Boston, and I had that platform of playing for the Bruins, and people seeing that I was genuine in my cause and mission. And you create those relationships over those years. And I get back to Boston 8 to 12 times a year probably. We still own a house, so I rent it out, but Boston's our second home. To answer your question, I don't have as many events as I would like to have up there. We do the Falmouth Road Race, we do Boston Marathon, we do the golf tournament. We try and sprinkle one or two other ones in here and there, but I think it's because I did so much when I was there that people are still attached to it, even though, it amazes me every year that my golf tournament sells out like almost immediately. So I don't know how it's continued to be successful, other than maybe I'm not a bad guy and people really believe in the causes and have continued to support them, even though I've been down in Florida for 8.5 years now.
I think, just to finish that point before we move to Gavin, I just want to add an additional point that your reputation remains here in Boston as just a incredible guy. And I think that's part of why you're able to maintain, the consistency of your events and things like that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. People ask all the time, what do you want to be remembered for in your playing career? And I personally wanted to be remembered for how much I gave back. It's awesome that I have 2 rings, but I was a part of a team. I was a small part of both those teams, but it was my initiative to be able to give back as much as possible.
I was surprised myself, Shawn, when you took a rask at your golf tournament what a good guy you were, and you have this reputation of being a big bully on the ice and everything like that. We had a great time that night. I really had a lot of fun, and I was it really took me by surprise.
I'm glad. Yeah, people think I'm a big meanie. I'm actually a big softie, but and people have the common misconception that I was a goon or a bully, but really it was quite the opposite. I was brought up that you stick up for other people that can't stick up for themselves. So that's kind of
1,103 penalty minutes.
yeah. But I was sticking up for myself or someone else for almost all of those.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say exactly that. It's not a bully mentality. It's more like a defender mentality, a protector mentality, I think. But I was curious, how did the sport of hockey and an athletic mentality help you post-career of hockey?
It's a great question. I think the discipline that you learn as a professional athlete, the work ethic that has to go into things, you understand that nothing is handed to you, given to you, and be able to use those transferable skills on the business side. I mean, I didn't know a whole ton about what the day-to-day looks like for an executive on the business side of a professional franchise, but I knew that I was going to get up at 4 a.m. every single day if I had to and work till midnight to figure it out until I was in a position that I felt comfortable enough. And I think professional athletes, and I'm going to sound a little bit arrogant here and I don't mean to be, but they have a special gift for being able to do the extra to get to that level, that if you can, like I said, if you can transfer that to the other side, it's invaluable. The other part would probably be leadership skills that you learn in the locker room growing up, how to treat people, how you want to be treated, holding people accountable the right way when dealing with, I have, I think 5-6 direct reports now, and reports under them that, constantly need feedback and guidance, and being able to, be in the locker room, be the guy that would call out the captain if he wasn't doing his job in the right way, and the same way with a young rookie that maybe wasn't pulling his weight, and knowing how one person would react to it one way, one person react the other way. So you have to be able to kind of read the person, and your job is to it's not just holding them accountable, it's to motivate them to get to be better, right? That's the end goal of everything. You're not doing it to be a bad guy. You're not, the only purpose of holding people accountable is to make the organization better. So being able to do that in the right way, I think is a skill that I learned from playing hockey my whole life.
And I think those are skills that apply to almost everything. And most of those skills very much apply to living with a chronic illness like Parkinson's, by the way.
I can't speak to it. I can only imagine the amount of dedication, work ethic, and thought that would go into your daily to make sure that you're slowing this as much as humanly possible. I mean, so I commend and applaud you, and it's remarkable how you guys deal with it.
I have a question. I know you have a new book out, Fighting My Way to the Top. How do you think some of the things that you talk about in your book might, be able to be applied kind of in this, situation with Parkinson's disease, and what sort of tips might you give, an individual work through some challenges?
Yeah, I mean, adversity sucks, right? It does, but adversity always makes us better. But we never learn. I don't know if I talk about it in the book, but I talk about it a lot. And people were having a meeting or a beer. Like, I didn't learn one thing from the fights I won. I learned them all from the fights I lost. And I don't just mean the actual fisticuffs. I mean, whatever the fight might have been, whether it was verbally, in a boardroom, in a pitch, on the ice. I mean, you learn from your mistakes, and you learn from adversity, and seeing how far you can push yourself to get through things. So again, I don't ever want to say I claim to know what it's like to live with this. I'm right now, unfortunately, that I'm not living with it. I've seen people go through it, but my speculation is that you have to work, you have to get up, you have to continue to move, you have to continue to keep yourself busy, to keep yourself in the best possible shape and form going. I mean, I've trained with Freddie Roach, who's, famously has Parkinson. He's one of the greatest boxing coaches in the history of time. And I see him when he has the mitts on and he's moving around with Manny Pacquiao, and it's almost like his body forgets that he has Parkinson's for the hour that he's in there doing mitts with, at that time, the greatest boxer in the world. It's really remarkable how strong your mind is when you can put the work in, I guess, or when you want to put the work in.
Yeah. Interestingly, I went to high school with Freddie, and
Oh, did you?
The entire Roach, yep.
I saw him last 2 weeks ago. I was in LA for the Super Bowl. I swung by Wild Card to say hello. He's such a
Yeah.
good human being.
Yeah, it's interesting because I know that he's had Parkinson's disease for quite a long time, but he hasn't really shared his diagnosis until, just recently. But yeah, I graduated with his brother Joey, his youngest brother.
Yeah,
I think you really got to see two extremes of the Parkinson's community with your grandmother having it so bad, and Freddie Roach, he's held up as well as anyone with Parkinson's I've ever seen long term. It's amazing with him. He's kind of stumbled upon a secret, I think, doing what he loves and the exercise and whatever else his mentality. But those two extremes between the way your grandma suffers Parkinson's and what Freddie Roach, he suffers with it, but he's found a way to, I don't want to say fight through it, but he's found a way to live with it as well as anyone I've ever seen. So that's interesting. Parkinson's on the two extremes very well.
I think also a common misconception of Parkinson's. I'm not telling you guys anything you don't know, but that it's just that it just affects older people. I mean, I think it was 3-4 years ago at my golf tournament. I had my captain from my first 3-4 years in the minors, Nathan Dempsey. He's only 3 years older than me, and his career was ended at 36 years old because of Parkinson's. He was in Switzerland and his hand wouldn't stop twitching, and literally they ruled everything else out because he's like, you're a professional hockey player, professional athlete, you're only 34, 35, 36 years old. I can't remember exactly how old. They're like, it's Parkinson's. And he's like, how? But it affects everybody. It's not just it's not just for my grandmother, right? It doesn't just affect my grandmother. It affects people all ages, shapes, and forms. And I'd like to, I try and help get that message out too, because I think it's important.
You are listening to the YOPN podcast. Living well starts here.
Thank you. Shawn, I know that you were at the National Rehabilitation Resource Center here in Boston with Terry Ellis and her group. And exercise is incredibly important for those, that are living with Parkinson's disease. I know that here in Boston, you also worked with another boxing trainer. And what was your experience when you visited, Sergeant College, BU, and what sort of things can you recommend to those in the community?
You kind of just hit the nail on the head. From what little knowledge that I have from being involved is exercise is extremely important. And Gavin said it right. Like, Freddie might be successful in this because he found something that keeps him moving, keeps his body and mind occupied while doing something he loves. I remember when I left BU, my other grandmother was diagnosed, but something else ended up getting her before Parkinson's really took hold of her. But I remember I called home like, Mom, get over to her house and get her up and get her effing walking around the block. Like, can't just be sitting on your butt. So exercise is extremely important. Yeah, I work with a guy named Tommy McInerney. He's one of my best friends. I started training with him my first year with the Bruins. Now, I boxed since I was a teenager, but when I got to Boston, I started working with him, and I think he's partnered with you guys, hasn't he, Bill, a few times to work. He does free lessons for people with Parkinson's. He wants to get back. He's always at my golf tournament. He's just a really good human being.
Yeah, he's doing more plumbing these days than boxing.
He's doing the electrical stuff. He's pulling a bunch of wires, he likes to say.
With your family history and boxing and hockey, I know that you are prone to concussions in both of those sports. And given what you just told us about the grandmothers, I wonder, do you have concerns about your genes having something that might be triggerable for a neurologic condition?
I'd be lying if I didn't say I haven't had that conversation with my wife. I was very fortunate in my career that I only had 2 concussions. Now, people say, well, that can't be it. You got hit all the time. But like 2 diagnosed concussions, one when I was 18, one when I was 35, 36, and debatable on whether that was a concussion or something to do with my equilibrium from where I got hit. So I was pretty lucky. I tried to put myself in a good position. That being said, though, I mean, we body check. There's constant contact. I mean, I'm not saying I'm a superhero and immune to any of this. I'm just saying for my role, it could have been a lot worse is all I'm saying. But no, I mean, I think about it, and I exercise 7 days a week for at least an hour to 2 hours in the morning. I'm constantly keeping myself busy, and I'm doing what I can without knowing what's to come. I'm doing, so is in the back of my head probably a little bit. Am I hopeful that it's not in my side of the genes and I'm not affected by it? Of course I am, but I don't know at this point.
But I have a much more important question.
All right.
Who's your favorite character on Letterkenny? And does Jared Queso come close to giving a picture of hockey with his, his Shorzy and all the little.
I've only seen one episode, actually. I've only seen one episode. Somebody told me I was like, my name was on an episode once too, which I was like, that's pretty.
That's why I asked. It
Yeah.
was.
It was? I've never
Yes.
seen the episode.
I'll find it for you.
Please send it over to me. I would love that. Yeah, I've never seen it. One of my last few years, one of the trainers is a big fan. He's like, you see, you're on Letterkenny, they're talking about you. I'm like, I am not that relevant for that show to be talking about me, but I'll take it.
Now you know who on the panel does their homework and studies up on you a little bit before the
Yeah,
interview.
right? That's impressive.
You are listening to the YOPN podcast. Living Well starts here.
Is he gonna come play a golf tournament again this year?
Yeah, he'll be there. I think he'll be there. I think he'll be back. He's got some vacation time, I think, in the summer. He's getting married. I'm going to it. So I think he'll be back in Boston by then, though. I hope so. We love having him.
We get four horrible golfers up here. If we get together, can we join the tournament too?
Yeah,
Terrible.
I don't care how bad you are, as long as you play quick and it's done in 4.5 hours. That's my rule of my golf tournament. So I limit it to 25, 26 foursomes, so we don't have the 2 foursomes on every single hole and it's a 6-hour round, because there's nothing more miserable. And that might build back to your original question, like that might be part of the reason that people keep coming back, because it's actually just an enjoyable time more than anything.
It's a nice course. And Mike, by the way, speak for yourself with golf. What do you miss most about the Boston community? I know you spent quite a long time here in Boston, but what do you miss most about?
The sense of community. I mean, I live in downtown Charlestown, right? It's a triangle. It's a mile, and everybody in there really thinks of themselves as a community within the city. So I do miss that. I miss being able to walk to my barber shop, walk to my coffee shop, walk to my local watering hole, the pizza place, the place where I like to get my burgers. Florida's not like that. The highway's behind me. It's a 20-minute drive to get anywhere at a minimum. So unless you live right downtown Fort Lauderdale, which I don't. So I miss that. I miss the fandom. Boston is I compare the two this way. Boston's a sports town, whereas Florida's an event town. So we're winning now. We are in an event. People are showing up. We're almost selling out every single night. It's been great this year, but Boston is a through and through sports town.
Boston is is like Texas, only in one way. We both think the world revolves around us. Well, we'd love for you to come to Dallas and have a golf tournament, or anywhere else besides Boston, outside the center of the universe, Boston. You'd get great support no matter where you went, because obviously your support for Parkinson's and just who you are and your ability to connect with people. So don't be afraid to stray out further than Florida and Boston. I think your appeal is at least in Texas and maybe beyond.
I appreciate that. Actually, I like that. My cousin lives in Dallas, so I'm out there a little bit. Great town. I enjoy that place. I'm good friends with the owner of the Dallas Stars and a bunch of people in that organization. So I try and get out there at least once a year.
Oh, you hear that, Mike? You hear that, guys? Bill?
Another big hockey town, Dallas.
Yeah.
Well,
Dallas, I grew up watching Dallas and San Fran, not Detroit and Chicago and stuff like that.
we're progressing.
Shawn, I have a question. Why do you think it's important for, professional athletes and people that have, gone through the process of elevating, to a level of notoriety? Why do you think it's important for them to stay connected with, charitable organizations?
I think we're given, however you want to say it, a gift. We're able to play a game for a lot of money for a living, and it gives us a platform to a fan base that you're immediately engaged in. And I think we as an athlete, there's some sort of responsibility to give back. That's my personal view on it. So with that platform, with the fan base you're already engaged with, it's a lot easier for us to create foundations and ask people to, be a part of us giving back. And, it's just at the end of the day, it's the right thing to do. I mean, people that don't have platforms give back an enormous amount as well. But I think as an athlete, when you have a little bit of notoriety, you can use that. You should be using that for good as well.
Yeah, one of our biggest challenges, just as an organization within the PD space, is just raising awareness and letting people know about, number one, about Parkinson's disease and, what they can do to not only go through the process of getting a diagnosis, but also supporting them with care. And this is actually going to be a vehicle for us to hopefully let people know about PD and, what they can do at least to get the process started. In many cases, unfortunately, what ends up happening is that an individual might not get their diagnosis, until far down the process of their symptom progression. And what we realize as an organization is the sooner that we can get them involved, higher chance that we have to change the trajectory of their progression, whether it be with medications, surgery, exercise, and proper care.
Let's talk on that a little bit, because I'll play ignorant. What is there a way for, back to Heather's question, is there a way for a common person like myself to go in and be tested for it? I actually don't know the answer to this, and I'm curious. Is there a way to look for early non-descriptive symptoms? Is there, if you guys want to talk about that a little bit, maybe whoever's tuning in to see my ugly mug can learn a little bit about it.
There's a gene test you can take. Heather, you can feel free to add on that anywhere, anytime you want. But there's a gene test you can take. They've identified like 130 genes out of 25,000 that are associated with Parkinson's.
The problem with the early testing is that there's not a lot we can do to slow the progression, even when we do know that we have it. So for those of us who've already been diagnosed, we're not so caught up in finding out why we got sick, but how to manage it now that we are, because we don't want to have high expectations in our lifetimes. There may be a cure, but we don't know, of course. There are dogs that can smell it. There are people, there's a person, at least one, that can smell Parkinson's. And there are ways that you could change your lifestyle knowing that you are prone to such things. But there's not a lot we can do, they're going to tell you to get more sleep, right? Avoid lots of stress or prolonged trauma, and to work out and to take care of yourself and to eat right. And here you are, an athlete, and you're doing all those things. So you're doing as much as you can. So anyway, Gavin, did you?
Eating right's in.
Yeah.
It depends on the day.
Well, it's chocolate sometimes.
Yeah.
The 80-20 rule when it comes to eating, you're doing fine. Well, I'm doing fine if I hit 60-40, good, bad. I was gonna say, I think the co-founder of Google did some genetic testing and found himself to be a 50% possibility of Parkinson's down the road. And in that case, he's trying to take precautions personally, and maybe even putting some money into brain research and that kind of stuff for a larger effort. But has anyone heard anything about that? I don't think I just made that up.
You're a creative guy. I don't think you're just making it up, though.
Generally speaking, what I know, we have 4 people on today's podcast that, have been through the process of diagnosis. What prompted you to get, to the point that you went in for the evaluation? Mike's or Gavin or Heather?
It took 3 different neurologists to go that I went to before they diagnosed me, because my finger was shaking a little bit like that.
Yeah.
I had similar symptoms. My finger and my leg would shake a little bit. It would wake me up in the morning. I was not a morning person, but I started waking up at 6 a.m. because my leg would wake up before me. And I went to a neurologist. I was 38. I had an extremely astute neurologist who diagnosed me just based on those conditions. The telling of how life is. I thought I had it bad because I was diagnosed with Parkinson's at 38. A couple of years later, this neurologist was my age. A couple of years later, she died of breast cancer. So who'd have thought on that day my fate would be better than her fate? And just, it put that in perspective along with some other things that have given me not only a fairly easy diagnosis, but an easier time with my Parkinson's than I would say most people have. I'm very fortunate.
My wife sent me to the doctor. She's the one who noticed it first. I just thought I was getting older, starting to shake a little bit. No big deal. The shaking was getting worse. The first neurologist that told me I had Parkinson's, I told her she was full of and walked out the door. Never went back. I really owe her an apology, but she was right. But,
Oh, maybe she's listening.
yeah, she should be a fan. You get to know the whole crew up at BU. I've worked with Terry Ellis 2 or 3 times with different things, and Kathy Thomas and stuff, and they helped me out a lot, pointing me in the right direction.
A lot harder to not have a diagnosis and to not have anyone to point to. Thankful for Michael J. Fox so that we can say, look, here's what we have. Even though it's such an individualized condition, and if you've met one person with Parkinson's, you've met one person with Parkinson's, it's still something we can point to, rather than having this sort of like random mystery thing where that doesn't really show and we're just always complaining, or people start to think we're acting like Woody Allen, Googling these symptoms, trying to figure things out, has been maddening. And for a lot of women, I've noticed we are told that we're sort of hysterical and why don't you just take another antidepressant and be quiet about it. But I do find that now that they're admitting this is happening much younger, and we have Matt Eagles from the UK as an example, got it when he was 7 or 8, was diagnosed. Sarah Regar from Sweden, I believe she was about 13, she was diagnosed. And there are incidents of people getting it much younger. They're listening finally, and they're having new ways to diagnose. But it takes a long time to get diagnosed. Mine came because I couldn't play my violin, which many people were very happy about. I just couldn't do the vibrato on my violin. And my writing, micrographia, and I still have the pain in my neck. And I happen to be a pain in the neck too, so it works pretty well. We give as good as we get, right, Shawn?
That's it.
So that's that story.
Yeah, and there's some specific testing, once you move further down, the process of evaluating. Certainly one of the really important parts is to get to a person that has a specialty, which is generally a movement disorder specialist that will go through, physical evaluation, and then there's some clinical tests that they could do to evaluate.
We were lucky living up here in Boston. We have the neurologists that can help us out. Tell the people in parts of the country where they have to drive 2 or 3 days to get to the movement specialist. We basically have to drive through an hour and a half to go to get to our doctor up there. But we're lucky around here. We've got so many of them right in this Boston area.
Yeah.
Hey, Shawn, how and why did you choose the APA to work with them?
That's a good question. I sat with my board, Tom Tinlin, who's on my board, and we were looking for good partners that were going to use the funds that we raise for a good cause. You'd be surprised when you go out to market and say, hey, what would you like? We're going to give you X amount a year. We try and commit this amount a year, depending on fundraising. You'd be surprised some of the responses you get. Some of them aren't that great, to be completely honest. But we've been partners for is it 10 years now? Something like that, maybe?
10 years, yes.
Yeah, I think we're coming up on our 10th year, and it's been a true partnership the whole time. And that's important because relationships are everything in my world. And it doesn't feel like a transaction. Let's put it that way. I think, we partner with each other and happy to raise as much as we can to give back. And we know that when we really believe down to our bone that when we were giving the money to them, it was going to the right places.
And the way that we've used the funds here in Massachusetts, as you may know, we're very involved in the community. Actually, Mike Q is on the board, and Mike Asian's wife, Gail, who is his helper, is also on the board. What we're involved with is very involved in the community. And so we provide patient aid scholarships, we provide education, and we additionally provide support groups to the community at no charge to those individuals. So we're very, very involved in the community in Massachusetts. And what we've seen actually over the course of this pandemic is we've seen an increase in the amount of people that are looking for support, and we've actually had to increase our support to the community.
One
That's him
thing,
asking me for more money, by the way.
one thing the APDA does really well that I've noticed, and this is across the board, is that you involve patients. You
Yes.
ask us what we think. You actually involve us in the process. So thank
Yep.
you for doing that. Do a great job at that.
Shawn, have you ever gone to a Rocksteady boxing class?
No, I haven't been to a Rocksteady. I've never been though. I've never been to one. I'm happy to go though. I will say though,
Popular.
when I retired from hockey, I went to a hand surgeon and said, "Can you fix this thing? It's pretty, messed up." And his advice was, "Stop hitting things." I said, "You went to school for how many years to tell me that?" Are you kidding me? Like, thanks, Doc.
Spitting chiclets.
So I've turned down the boxing. I have a heavy bag I hit maybe once every couple of weeks, but I haven't really been doing much boxing since I retired. Jiu-jitsu is my new outlet for physical altercation, education, exercise. But I'm happy to go. I'll even go hold the mitts. I'm happy to go.
Well, we'll have to get you there when you come up to Boston. We'll have to get you up there.
All right.
And Mike, why don't you just speak a little bit about Mike and Gavin and Heather? Speak about why you think, beyond just the exercise part of it, right, with Rocksteady, why has it been, important, and why do those programs, why are they important to the PD community? Gavin, you have your hand up.
Oh, thank you. It leads right in. I was going to ask, Heather talked about relationships. We mentioned relationships. It's so vital, these social connections with other people with like minds. And at first, I want to say thank you to Shawn for just the act of caring to form a foundation and interact with the community. I mean, it's sure the money we raise is very valuable, but it's just the fact that you come on the show and you listen and you take part and you involve yourself with this. It's very inspiring to people like us. And so these sort of connections and meaningful relationships, and because Parkinson's, it can get you down in so many ways, not just physically, but what you lose, what you can no longer do, the connections you have, the self-esteem you most people lose in dealing with others. So the boxing gives you back that self-esteem, the connections. They're doing so many more studies now. People are, and maybe because of Rocksteady boxing, but it's it's exercise plus community. It's exercise plus what's going to build you up and give you confidence and help keeps you interacting in the community. Because when you isolate, when you get back in your shell, it's going to speed up the disease.
I met Mike at Rocksteady Boxing. We both lived near each other to begin with, but I met Mike at Rocksteady Boxing. And how I met him was, I made a joke about we can't smell our own farts, and he started cracking up.
You knew you found a buddy then, talking about farts. I love it. I was going to ask who won the fight.
No, Mike is the first guy. He told the story about fighting the same guy 3 times at a Kinks concert. He waited for him every single year.
Yeah, I said, but my record's better than Muhammad Ali's. I said, but no one knows about it. It was bouncing at this Providence Civic Center. This one guy, I had two fights with him. He's the toughest kid I ever met. This is the third time I was waiting for him to go. So as soon as the lights went out and the Kings came out and started hitting their first drum, I saw this fist coming from the right hand side. I knew we were going at it again. The Providence cops used to always say, "Do you want me to throw this kid out?" And I'd say, "No. Put us in this back room. And if he walks out of here, let him walk, because that's the way." So two out of 3 times he never came out. One time he walked out. Well,
I bet you didn't even like the Kinks. You just went for the fights.
Exactly.
I was working on the floor.
Was their song Hatred playing? They have a great song called Hatred about fighting. It's great.
That was like an early cage
He
match.
just band like the Kinks. We're all old people.
I've heard of the Kings.
Yeah.
And Mike, you're both the Rocksteady certified boxing instructors, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Study is great. It's like any other program. I'm doing cycling now also.
Oh,
And but it's the people that you meet. You become friends with these people from working out every day. When I met Mike, you can joke with him, and kid around with it because he knows he's got Parkinson's. He knows what you're talking about, so you can kind of people. We were talking about that earlier. People with Parkinson's, we joke and kid around with each other all the time. It's funny, but probably to someone outside of the Parkinson's world, they don't think it's funny. They would say, "You guys are being mean, making fun of the disease." Well, we're not we're laughing at you. We're kind of like laughing at ourselves all the time, you know. And APDA gives us that shot to join the programs, and we can meet. I've met so many great people through the different programs that I've taken through the APDA.
I said often that me and Mike are going to people that can have a podcast so nobody can really understand us.
We're the only radio show where Mike loses his voice and I stutter from the Parkinson's disease. That's one thing I lost with the DBS. I gained so much now. I don't shake anymore like I used to. I was all over the place, and I gained that, but I lost my speech. Sometimes is horrible. I know. I can tell on people's faces sometimes. And what's that?
Can we show them the secret handshake? Not really a secret. Talking about
my secret handshake to you is different to Gavin.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Mike, I think that
one.
I think that your stuttering has improved. I know that you just recently had a little bit of a tune-up, right? And you know, it's a process. And you know, one of the things now that you're on Zoom, I think you might be able to blame anything on a connection with Zoom.
You are listening to the YOPN podcast. Living well starts here.
You're talking to 4 people who've had DBS surgery already. We've all had brain surgery.
And that has been one of the most significant breakthroughs in the course of treatment for Parkinson's disease. And we're certainly seeing much more of that being utilized in the field. And we engage with all the large companies, many of which are actually based here in the Boston area that do that sort of surgery.
Center of the world, like you said, Gavin, the center of the world, Boston.
It all goes back to Boston. I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
But I think you are looking at kind of a Parkinson's boom in the Boston area. So you guys are lucky, and Dallas too. I mean, all of us and Heather's out in the San Francisco area. We're all so very fortunate to be so close to, you know, the technology, the knowledge, and the care and the access, and close to boxing programs and all these other things, and big cities. Like, we're so fortunate. The real, you know, the worst suffering I've seen with Parkinson's is people without access to those things, and in the other countries, and you know, lower income countries. And you know, it's nice to be able to sit and talk and joke like this. We're fortunate, but you know, the reality is a larger share of people with Parkinson's don't have these moments like we have. So
Yeah, they don't
I'm
even
always
have
grateful
access to
have
meds.
this. I'm always grateful to have these talks and you people and what we have.
Yeah, actually, Heather and Mike, we actually had a discussion a couple of weeks ago, and we're going to move it forward tomorrow night. We have a diversity, equity, inclusion committee that we've started here. We're also doing it on a national basis. And so I'm presenting to the national APDA group on how we might be able to engage, you know, with a much more diverse community. And it's incredibly important to us, not only, you know, in Boston, but beyond as a national organization. It's been critically important. And Shawn, how would you suggest people get involved with your foundation? Do you still have slots available for the marathon, and are all your positions filled for Falmouth? Do you know?
I don't think Falmouth is filled yet. I think Boston is sold. I think we got those ones go quick. I mean, everybody wants to run the Boston Marathon, right? Like, it's a lifelong goal for so many marathoners that maybe can't make the time or whatever.
You want to run again, Mike? I'm ready to drink. When he ran, Shawn, I drank one beer for every mile he ran.
So you got almost 27 beers.
26 beers.
That's impressive.
I'll be your sober friend and drive you around then. How about that?
Sounds good.
I wanted to say thank you for using your fame for the greater good of all concerned. I wanted to ask you what your grandmother's name was.
My grandmother's name, Maureen Mills.
Maureen. So here's to
Yes.
Maureen. And I
Maureen.
also wanted to ask you to repeat your website for the.
Yeah, it's thorntonfoundation.org.
Thank you.
So yeah, if people want to look at the site, we have, if things are available, they're on there. There's also ways to just donate. If you can't run a marathon, you can still give money to a great cause. There's a button, just press the button. It's that easy. It's like Amazon, just press the button, do it to a great cause. And then our golf tournament isn't sold out yet. I think we're about to go on sale with it in the next couple of weeks, I'm guessing. But it's always a great time. We usually have some celebrities show up, and I bet probably every single person that's there also has 26 beers, or at least a beer on every hole. It's a good time.
And there will be at least one celebrity will be there, Shawn. That'll be you.
Yeah, but I should probably show up to that.
Yeah.
I was close to missing it one year. I was really close. The date was set, all this stuff. My wife went into labor 3 days before the event. So I had to move my flights to like the night before. And then the flight got canceled. And then I had to fly to Worcester. Like I was like, I can't not show up to my own event. But it was, I mean, it wouldn't have been my fault. I'm sure people would have understood at the end of the day. But it was, yeah.
You are listening to the YOPN podcast. Living Well starts here.
Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's great talking to you guys. Yeah, please send us over so we can promote it, and let me know if you want to come to the golf tournament for a beer. Happy to buy you one.